today we're going to be looking at how to build a chatbot based on your root system, your website, and all the material that you have. So essentially what we're creating in this module is a way to communicate with your data, with your site, with your course, with your whatever it might be, everything that you've built so far. And this is going to be an AI assistant that is going to be using your system knowledge, obviously based on what you want it to be using, not everything. And that's going to be the way that we're going to be building this. One thing to note is that you might have had a chatbot before, and the way that most chatbot providers work is quite different because it's expecting you to kind of give it information and train it on a separate dashboard. Here, what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be using the information already in your root system, which means that it already knows your product. It knows what it needs to know in order to be giving accurate information. So we are kind of like losing the training part in a way, and we are just going to be focusing on how to make sure that it's giving the right information in the right way, and obviously setting the boundaries of what it can access and what it cannot. So in part 2, we did websites, databases, functions, like everything is already set up in your system. So you should have a website, you should have some sort of an interface live in order to obviously be able to deploy a chatbot too. So you also have a database. So this is a Supabase database, most likely, if you've been doing part 2 as it was designed. And then you have the functions and all of the kind of functionalities that are going to be able to run and facilitate the chatbot that we're going to be building today. One of the things that you've also looked at is security rules and kind of like setting the basics of what gets shared and how in your system. This is the question that we're obviously trying to respond to. So who is it or what is it that is going to be answering people when they are on your site and you are asleep? And that is obviously a chatbot. And this is not a new thing. There are a million chatbots, million different options for how to build a chatbot. But what we're going to be doing differently here is, like I mentioned before, we're going to be using your own data and your own root system and your own website as the source of the information that this chatbot shares. So there's not really anything to train per se, because it already knows your product, it already has your website. And what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be repackaging that data in an interactive way. So again, one of the changes to most providers is that when you're using this type of chatbot builder, or you're creating it in this way, it will only answer based on the data in your root system or on your site, whatever you decide the boundaries of where it has access to. So it's not going to be answering questions about the capital of France, or let me find out how to make hummus. It is only going to answer questions that are related to your product. And when you're training it with the root system and with the setup that we have, you can actually contain it to only answer based on those answers. So it knows where to stop. It doesn't give answers about things that are not in your setup, not in your system, and not in your website. And that is a non-negotiable. That is what it always does. And it is yours. It's your database, your functions, you own it. There's no renting. There's no monthly subscriptions that you need to pay anyone. The only thing that you're going to be paying for is the API costs. So what it can do is it will only answer based on what it knows. So again, if there is something that is not in your system, not in your website, it will not be able to obviously share that. It is not going to be using the general AI to give answers. It will only give answers based on what it knows based on your data. This is obviously a double-edged sword in a way. If you want an AI chatbot that is going to be more generic, you can also train it that way, but that gives a bit more leeway for people to also abuse it and misuse it, which will end up in your API bill. So what I would recommend is to make this in the most kind of concise and boundaried way. So the way that it does it is it will actually cut each page into snippets, and it will organize them in a way that is going to make sense to it. It is going to place each one of these snippets or passages in a kind of a meaning map, meaning that it will be able to kind of search for the right thing when the person is using natural language to ask about your product. And they are all going to live in a table in your database. Again, this is a question I get very often, which is that, can it access everything in my database? Of course not. It will only access the one table that you are creating for this specific use. So for example, this is the one that I learned the hard way. So for example, if you have a snippet or a passage with two different prices, it will be able to mix them up. But if you put them in different passages, it will be able to separate them correctly. So make sure that the cutting and the snipping of these parts is accurate. And obviously you're just going to know this by testing the bot as you've built it. So every passage or snippet has a place where it lives. It's on a map. So things that are very similar to each other are going to be more close to each other. And then when the AI gets a question about it, it will find the right thing. So for example, if someone is asking about pricing and you have very accurate and multiple kind of like pages about your pricing, it will be able to kind of look for all of these different pricing information snippets and find the right information. And this again means that a person can use natural language and your AI is going to be able to give an answer that is accurate and tailored to that specific question. So it's not going to be saying the same thing every single time. It is still an AI, so it's still going to be interpreting the information, but it will be doing it in a contained way. So if there's a question about pricing, for example, it is not going to go to your privacy policy and try to find answers there. It will go to the snippets that are related to pricing. So it just lands where the nearest matches are. And this is a really good example to have here because obviously there are going to be questions that maybe there is no answer to. So like if someone asks about the capital of France or how to make hummus, nothing is really near enough in your system. So it just refuses. But it refuses in a polite way and in a way that you decided you wanted to answer. So in my case, for example, if it doesn't have an answer, it guides the person to book a call with me, which is obviously the best next step. In your case, it could be something different, but the goal is that it doesn't just say, no, I will not answer, but it will actually guide that person to the thing that is next best thing for that answer. What happens in the time between the question and the answer? And this is going to be happening on the background, so you won't be able to see it in real time per se, but this is what happens. So what it does, it checks the question, then it puts that question on the map that we just saw. Then it takes the nearest passages, however many there are, quite often it's 6 or it can be more or less, and these will be used to build the answer. It will ask how close they are. If something is not close enough for it to determine that this is a good answer, it will not do that. Again, you can actually impact how strict or loose this is. So if you wanted to give very loose answers, kind of like grab it all, make an answer up, even if it doesn't seem like it's super close, you can do that. Or you can keep it really tight and accurate and precise. And the last thing obviously is to write the answer. So it provides the answer to your customer. And the goal of this whole thing is that it is an expert on you, on your product, on your site, and it is polite and appropriately guides to the right place for anything else. So again, you don't end up paying for API bills around questions that are nothing to do with your product. This is the question I get a lot, which is, can people ask about your customer data? Because it lives in Supabase, it's the same place. And the answer is no, because of the way that it's built. So it never really has keys to anything else. It never actually even holds them. So a model cannot give out something that it doesn't have access to. So it obviously doesn't have access to keys to the places where it's not supposed to go. Also, it can't reach your database. So it has two things. It has the published passages or pages. So for example, in my case, my Rooti chatbot, it has my website information and it has my course information. So it has the data from your website in passages and it has the question that you ask. There's not really anything that it can invent because it's only using the data that it has. It will read everything as a stranger. So it will not see your contacts, leads, purchases, whatever it is. It does not have the keys to those things. And there is no side door to get in either. So there is no real risk that it could enter into your system. And obviously, if you want to be mega careful, you could have a completely separate database with a different key and a different login for this. But there really is no need, because that's the way that these are built. What does the person actually using the chatbot see? So they see a character. And again, this is obviously completely changeable, adjustable, and modifiable for you. So in our case, the way that we built our chatbot is based on a character and not just a chat box. But you can obviously do that the other way around. You can say that it has a chat box, it has a message instead of a face. Doesn't matter. Again, you can just tell your Claude to change it and it will. The way that the main one that we have out of the box, the template, is based on one question at a time, and you actually don't see the kind of chat going through, so you don't see all the different messages. Again, if you want to change this, you just tell Claude, hey, can you please show all messages here instead? Doesn't really matter. It's all up to you to decide what you want to do with it. And every answer points somewhere. So that's a fundamental logic that we have there as well. So because it's using your website data, it actually knows where everything lives. So when it's answering about pricing, it will also add a link to your pricing page. And that is automatically done because it knows where that information came from, which is really good because when you want to know more, you have the link right there in the same message. And the thing is that it's never really a dead end. So even if you ask about something weird or something not related to your product, it will still answer and politely guide you to the right place. Again, completely up to you what you wanted to guide it to or how, but it will always lead somewhere. It won't just like stay there blank saying nothing. There is something called voice, which is related to how does it speak? What's the tone of voice that it has? If it sounds very formal or it's the opposite, you can refine this. You can refine the voice that it has, obviously in the same way as you refine AI's voice in other ways. For example, if it refuses things that it should answer and it has an answer to, maybe you've set it a bit too tight in terms of its scope. So in those cases, you can loosen the setting a bit. You can give it a bit more leeway, a bit more creativity when creating the answers. Again, you will find out when you're testing it. Also, sometimes it can answer quite vaguely. Maybe it's using the wrong pages. Maybe it actually doesn't have good enough data. Sometimes if you ask a chatbot and it gives you a really weird answer, it's actually because your website doesn't explain it very well. So this is also a very good way to get feedback on your website, on the data. Is your chatbot giving answers that are understandable? Is it giving accurate answers? Because sometimes you might have pages on your site that actually contradict one another. And obviously the chatbot is going to get confused about what is true. So it's really good to use the chatbot also as a way to kind of audit and scope your page to see if it's clear, clean, and accurate all across. The other thing that can happen is that if you're asking about something you just published, maybe it hasn't added it in yet. It actually does that simultaneously, but you need to publish it in order for it to be available for the AI. And this is again to make sure that it's not sharing things that are not on the public site. So it is really a safety mechanism above anything else. One of my favorite things about chatbots in this way is that you get to see the questions and the answers, right? So because you're using Supabase for all of this, obviously all the questions and the answers are also stored in Supabase. So you will get to see the questions people ask, the answers that the AI gave, if it refused, and like how big was the request and all of these things. So you can see the actual quality of the questions and the answers. You can also obviously use this in your, let's say, morning ritual. This is what I do in mine. In my morning ritual, I get all the questions that were asked from Rooti the night before or the day before, and I get to see what are the questions that people are asking. And also I can see the answers if I want to, so I can go and make connections and corrections in my material if necessary. One thing that you can add is that you can actually see the costs, obviously, depending on what API providers you use. You can keep a calculator on the cost of how much is your chatbot costing you. And yeah, this I already mentioned. You can put it in your morning briefing. You can put it in your evening. You can obviously also do it manually. So you can just ask, hey, give me all the questions and answers you've ever given, and let's analyze them to make it better. You can even automate some of that if you want, and if you have a good enough site and your agents are refined enough to be able to do that kind of work. In the course, you have quite a few different lessons about the chatbot itself. I recommend you go through all of them to kind of like go into the specs and the areas of building it for yourself. Remember that the one root fits all. Again, this is only as good as your system. It's only as good as your site. It's not going to be magically better because the data that it feeds on is already there. Your pages are going to be there. So they're going to be the public ones or even hidden ones. You can also make login or pages that are behind a login searchable if you want. Again, these are all the decisions that you can make when you're building your chatbot. There is going to be the part that answers. So what is the actual kind of back end logic to your chatbot? Why it can't leak. So we're going to talk about and see how you can make sure that it's secure and safe. What your visitors see, how you can make it yours. So looking at the voice and scope, things that we talked about. And then obviously the analysis and testing. And there are a few things that we haven't touched on here, which is defining if you are going to give people access to a wide range of different types of questions. So again, you get to decide if you are paying for very generic questions, you're going to make it really loose. It can ask about things that are not in your website, for example, or are you going to keep it really strict and tight? Again, this is all about your comfort level and how much API cost are you willing to absorb. There's also quite a few things in the chatbot build that are going to be helping you make caps for daily caps, or if you want to have limitations for how many requests one IP address can make, etc. There are a lot of technical details about that. So there's a way to kind of like contain the cost for yourself. One other thing, especially if you're using Anthropic, is that you can actually just cap your spend. So because it's using API tokens, if you run out of API token money, it will actually just stop functioning. In which case you can actually have like an error message trained on your chatbot, and it will, for example, guide them to your email or book a call with you. Again, it's all up to you how you handle these elements and situations. In the modules, you'll go deeper into each one. And in the repo, you will see how these work. Let me show you the template that you're going to get. So this one does not have the brain yet, as it does. But this is the chatbot template that you're going to be getting. And obviously, you will be able to put it on your website. Ours is here. This is how it looks like. It's Rooti. It can answer all kinds of questions. And yeah, you can do anything you want with yours. You can make it be a continuous chat scroll if you want, and it will answer your questions. If you want to learn more, or if you want to go deeper into the lessons, obviously you go to part 3 and module 9, and this is where you will get your zip, and this is where you get to your details of building your own chatbot. And there's actually an interesting thing that is going to be here in the system also, which is related to what models you use for different things. So for example, to keep the cost as low as possible, the way that this works is it uses Gemini as the model to find the right passages, and then the answers only are created with Anthropic. Again, you don't have to do that, but that's just a cheaper way to deliver these answers. Again, these are in the repo, these are in the module, these are in the template for you to kind of set up and see how it works for you. But yeah, the end outcome is that your site will answer in your voice with your material and hopefully with the lowest possible cost and contained in the correct data, which you can see, research, analyze, and make it better. As always, let me know if you have any questions. I'm really excited to see your chatbots. Thanks.